Hi, I'm Tom, one of the co-founders of Keel, and I'm going to show you around by building the backend for a to-do app. So let's dive straight in. The Keel schema contains all the information around your project. So we kind of say it contains your data models, your actions, and your permissions. So let's start with the data model. So the great thing about starting with a data model is that it makes you think about your data model. And we kind of suggest that most teams do this collaboratively and work together. And that's why we kind of design the Keel schema so that it's easy and accessible for less technical people as well to really kind of gather around and collaborate on your data model. So in our to-do app, we're going to start with an account model. So here you're defining models. So we'll have an account model. Let's just scaffold all that. A task model so for the actual to-do itself. And then let's do a project module. So in this case, like accounts can have projects and tasks. You'd be able to build this out for a more complicated structure with team members and invites and stuff, which we'll maybe do in a later demo, but I'll keep it simple for this one. So now we've got our basic models. Let's start to build out some fields. So in here, you describe your fields and your data. These get turned into database tables. So let's give an account a name, an email, an identity, which we'll come back to in a second. That's great. A task, let's keep it simple. That needs a title, whether it's complete or not. So let's do completed. So you can see here that we've got these base scalar types built in, but we're also getting useful feedback through the VS Code extension. So there we go, saying that data type doesn't exist and suggesting. So the important thing with this is you'll see as we go along, this is fully type safe, these schemas, giving you really rich autocomplete, and we spend a lot of time on the developer experience of this schema editor. So let's create a project now. Let's give that a name as well. Doesn't need too much in the project. And now let's kind of start to build this relational data structure. So everything in Keel is relational data. So a task can have a project. So we just pop in a project there. Let's make that optional. So if we put a little question mark there, that means that column is nullable in the database. And then let's put on the project side of things, let's have the tasks. So tasks, and that's task. And then if we use this syntax here, that just tells us it's a kind of a one-to-many relationship. If we were to remove this, you can see that this then feeds back and says like you need to store the belongs to field on the other side. So really rich feedback, useful feedback all the time. But we had that already, so that's fine. Now let's kind of link stuff to the account as well. So a task needs an owner and a project needs an owner. Again, you could build this out, add an extra model for teams, and then link everything within the team rather than just a particular account. But that is how we'll start. So just starting with that, let's pop over to the terminal and let's just do Keel run. See what happens. So this Keel run spins up a kind of a full local environment for you. So you can see that it's done the migrations and set us up a new database, done the migrations and added these tables. And this, which we'll see how we use these APIs in a second, but it's created 3 APIs. So you always get a GraphQL, a JSON HTTP API, and an RPC API. You get them all run at the same time, so you can use them. You don't have to choose, you can use them and interchange them. And then we also get this local development console. So we switch to that. This is the Keel console. So this is connected to my local project, but then you'd also use the console to manage deployed projects. So just as a starting point, let's pop in here and visualize the schema. So we can see the data model we've created. And again, we really think that a data model should be a collaborative experience. So we designed this to be a great way for people across the business to kind of collaborate and understand what is the data we store and how are things related to each other. You can export this so you can share it, etc. So we can see that we have our identity model, which we'll come to, our accounts and tasks and projects are all linked together. If we pop over to the database tab, we can see that tables have been created, they're all going to be empty, and here you can interact with your database. So if we pop back to the schema, let's now add actions. So actions are things you can do on that data, so which essentially get turned into API endpoints. So let's start with account. actions in here. And how actions work is you give them a verb, so kind of create, update, list, delete type thing, but then you name your thing. So the suggested names will just be kind of simple ones like create, update, account. But the idea here is we don't auto-generate any CRUD. Like you don't want to end up with an API full of auto-generated things. You just want stuff that you need and also is tailored to you. So, for example, sometimes it could be you could want to call it create account, but sometimes you might want to call it invite account or something like that. So we want to make sure you always have the flexibility to name things and design your API how you want to design it. So the structure for these right ones, so like create account with something. So in here, we pass in the things we want to create the account with. We can see we already have an error. So the error is telling us that when you're creating something, you need to pass in all the required fields. So let's pass in the name here. And then we'll pass the name and email and identity. I'll come back to identity when we talk about permissions. So let me just make identity optional for now. Let's hide it, and then we'll come back to it. So this just creates an account with a name and email. Let's do get an account. Get account, basic one. And then in the task side of things, we've got actions. Oops. This will have the standard one, so we'll do create task with title. So create a task, let's get a task, just by ID, it's easy. Let's update a task. Update task. So this one, the first set brackets is the read, so you could put any unique field in there that allows you to get the thing you want to update. And then in the second with, you're saying what you want to update. So we could do title and complete. We can mark both of these as optional here. So we're saying we want to create an API action endpoint called update task, which takes an ID and optionally either takes title or completed. And then if you set those, it'll update it. So all these kind of built-in actions, Keel handles the plumbing. You design how they work, you add the logic, and then Keel wires them all together. Let's finish this up. So a list one. So list is fun. We can do list tasks. And in the first get filters of list, whatever you provide gets turned into a kind of flexible listing controls. So we can just put in project.id, for example, and that would allow us to list tasks by the related project ID. Maybe also whether they're complete or not, so we can return things. That's a good example. We could do something like complete tasks if we wanted to, and then we could add in here where on so that would allow us to kind of, so I mean about still being able to design your APIs and call things how you want them to. Some other interesting bits on list while we're on this one is in here we can put in some either order by, so we can define the order by on the API side, or we can just pop in sortable, and we can pass properties in that we want people to be able to sort on. So let's just be able to sort them, let the client sort them by completed or not. Let's make both these optional because we don't want to force these filters. And then finally, we should do a delete one. So delete task by ID. Projects, we'll keep this one really simple. Let's have a way to create a project. We can't even create with an ID, that doesn't make any sense. Let's delete a project. Let's just do that. Project. While we're here, we might as well do a list projects and a get project. That's what we're missing. So this is an example where you do just want to build out the basic CRUD with the standard things, but it still gives you that control. Okay, so now we've got our actions, but the Keel's permissioning model is that everything is permission denied by default. So nothing is accessible until you add a rule that says how this item can be accessed. So let's start by talking about identity. So identity is a built-in model, and it's essentially like an abstracted wrapper around your login method. So it would either link to an email, link to an email password account, or a Google account, or some other OpenID Connect auth provider. But how it then it presents back into your model, and you can just reference this anywhere that something needs a direct link to a login. You can link it to identity. So what we suggest you do is create a model-like account or user or whatever you want to call it, and then create a unique reference to identity. So that means that one login provider is just going to have one of these accounts. And then you can see here straight away we've added a new field, so we're getting some good feedback. So when someone creates an account, we need to set that field. And instead, we don't know that, let's set that value dynamically. So actually we can use the suggestion in the error. So we can do this little set, which is saying that when someone runs the create account, we're going to set the identity using the identity in context, which is just going to be the logged in user's identity. We can also do something quite nice here. We can get rid of email, and because we can pull that in. So we can do account.identity. Sorry, not account.identity, account.email. There we go. And now it's no longer going to be cross with us because it knows we've set these fields within the body of that thing. Now we can do this my account piece as well. So we've got a get account generally, but we want a way to say, like, just give me the account that I can access myself. And in here we can then use a limit. Aware identity equals identity. So now we've created an endpoint called my account that will just return my account. And because that's a unique field, it knows how to do that. If we were to not make that unique, it's going to say you need to get off something unique. So really good, good feedback and good type safety all the way through. So now we've done that, let's start to add some permission rules. So permission rules can be set in various places. They can be set at the model level like this. And in here, we just define which actions they apply to. So let's just do get, there's only get and create. So we'll just do the get down here. And then an expression that needs to evaluate true to allow someone in. So for example, if you wanted this just to be public, you could just say the expression will just be true. But in this case, we want to say that account.identity equals ctx.identity. So basically, someone can only get their own account, which makes this a little bit superfluous, but we'll leave it there for now. For a create, there obviously isn't a record already, so what we want to do is we can put a particular rule directly in there, which just context is authenticated. So that just means like let anyone in as long as there is an identity in context. You can also have multiple ones, so we could have done that same thing by doing that down here. And then with these permission rules, one of them needs to pass, so all permission rules are ordered against each other. So there's another way to express that. So now we have a way that you can create an account and you can only access your account. So that's fine when you've got these kind of simple data structures, but now let's go link these things to your account. So let's bring these fields back, the owner and the owner as well. So we'll do one at a time. So in tasks, we're having the same thing. It's like now when you create a task, how does it know what field to put in there? So we'll do that in a similar way where we do task.owner equals context.identity. And now, because we've created this unique link up here with this field here to identity, we can now jump through the identity into the account. So now it just means now the task owner is the identity.account. And we can just use that exactly the same thing down here. So if you were building a slightly more complex structure, let's do that as a project. Instead of just a single account, you would have a team. You would then also be able to go all the way through the graph and be able to go to a context identity team, account team, and you can move through really easily to build these sets, but also for permission rules. So let's do the permission rules for tasks as well. Do the same thing here. This time we're going to have a lot more actions. So you get create, list, delete, and And then here we're going to go task.owner .identity.account. So similar structure here. You can only kind of access and control your own things in this simple permission model. And then same again, we will just say that anyone can create, but in order to create, there needs to be something in context with a link in. So identity is authenticated. Let's essentially apply this down here because it's very similar. And the same as this. So these permission rules are really powerful. These ones are very linked to just the data that's already on that object, but you can move through the graph. So project.owner.fields, I can write permission rules on this project that checks fields in related models. So you can imagine like this data model or how your data model connects and the graph of tables. You can move through that. You can traverse your data model to build quite complex permissioning. That should give us access to. That should give us now actions and permissions to actually do some stuff. So let's just flip back to the local console and let's have a look at the API Explorer. So the API Explorer is your documentation for your API. So if we pop back to this overview, we can see that we've got 3 APIs, which we talked about, and now we can see the docs for these things. So here's the create account action that we've looked at. It takes a name and returns the whole account model. We can see that this is what it looks like on the JSON API. That's what it would look like on a GraphQL API. And then this was with the RPC API. Also in here, you can actually use the API directly. We'll look at that in a bit. So these are quite straightforward ones. My account doesn't take anything, returns you a whole account, create task, similar thing. If we then look at, still an interesting one. So list tasks. So lists, as we said, take those input arguments and then kind of generate a kind of query way to query it in the request. So we try to get the right balance of you being able to create and design your APIs from a backend point of view, but also make it really easy to create flexibility so you can give the client control. So you can, like how we did sorting, for example, we can either set the sorting ourselves or we can let the client decide whether it's sortable. So now if we come in here, we can see we've got our where filters. So if you provide where, you can provide any of these combinations. So completed equals or not equals, project ID equals one of or not equals. These are all changed. This kind of querying structure changes depending on the data type. So if we were to introduce a string type, we'd get things like starts with or contains. If we introduce a number, we'd have greater than or less than, etc. So without doing much at all, you're getting nice APIs that have pagination, have querying, have sorting, etc. We can see how that would be reflected in the variables of a GraphQL query as well. So this shows us this is the API stuff we could use. We could now go and build some front end. We could use these APIs directly. We also generate you a fully typed TypeScript client. And then we have kind of React wrappers and helpers as well. So you get a very generated type client, which from a front end you can build really quickly. And that updates live as well as you're saving. So you get end-to-end type safety from the data schema at the database layer all the way through to your clients, which is great. But one of the coolest things about Keel is that as well as being this backend engine, we really believe that backends are for the whole business. And then they should power and be the internal tools that your team use to operate your technology. So that takes us to this all tools section under operate. And see in here, what we've done is we've taken those APIs and we've generated internal tools that sit on top of those. So let's go and start to use this stuff. So we've got a create account. So this would be your sign up process. So you've kind of logged in, you've done the auth step and you've got an identity now. So let me just sign up with an account, Tom. That has now created me an account. We've just run that action. You can see if we jump into the database under account, we now have an entry for me. Woohoo! So let's go into tasks. Let's create a task. Let's go buy milk. Completed, false, etc. So we can see that we're getting good UI on top of the APIs we've designed. And the big difference versus like a traditional admin panel for a database is this isn't just doing CRUD actions against your database, this is using the APIs you've created. So all the permission rules, any custom code, any validation, etc., all gets executed and run through here. So you've got lots of safety and protection, so allowing the whole team. This has worked because I'm logged into the console, therefore I have an identity and everything is tied to me. So if we go and have a look at, if I was to list tasks now, I've got my task, which is great. If I was in here, you can see I've got the filters, so I can toggle this to just show me things that are completed or not. And so we've got all the power of the API gets brought into here. We can see that we said one column was filterable, completed, so now we can sort by that. And so you can see how those APIs turn into really solid internal tools that rely on the same permissioning and structure as everything. So now we can also show monitoring. So monitoring is the other great piece of the puzzle. So for everything that happens in Keel gets distributed tracing automatically. So we everything's traced, everything's using OpenTelemetry compatible tracing. So if we put in here, we can see this list task that I just did. We've designed this not to, like, one of the particular principles of Keel is it's not a black box, right? We use trusted, battle-tested technologies and we wire them together in the same way as you would. It just means you don't have to. So we don't hide anything away. So here we can see we've got a post request coming in here. The runtime receives it. We do an authorization check. We check the token. We also show you the SQL we run, so you can see what's happening, how long it took, etc. So we can, here's our list tasks. Here's the SQL that ran based on that, and you can see that we check permissions at the end. And how permissions work is on the resulting data back, we check permissions against that data. So there's no chance you can ever have leak data that doesn't match those expressions. So really powerful. And then as you start to write custom code, which we'll talk about in a second, you can see how this pulls it all together and you get really easy, clear tracing for everything out of the box. So let's jump back into the schema. So far, we've just made everything with built-in actions. So it's great because we haven't had to write any code. We've just declared how things should work, and then Keel's done the plumbing to make that really easily. And we've got a schema that has a bunch of API actions that would allow us to create an account, sign up, create tasks, create projects, which I haven't done in the tools, but we can look at that in a second. But the interesting bit is that's never going to cut it, right? You need to be able to write custom code, and you need to be able to extend it however you want. So let's go and start to add some code. So the easiest way to write code is to add this function piece onto any existing action. So if we just run that and then do Keel generate and pop back in here, you can see now we've got a new function called update task. So update task is a fully typed wrapper here and provides, so when you add function onto an existing action, that allows you just to add hooks into that action. So you don't want to change how it works, you just want to manipulate the process and the data. So in here we can see in an update hook, if we pop in here, we get after write, before query, and before write. And so basically, depending on what you want to hook in there, you can decide whether you just want to return some data back, after you've written data into the database, do you want to change the data that's returned back to the client? Before write, you actually want to change the values before you put them in the database. Before query is really interesting because we give you an instant of our query builder. So while that one in the schema, we've just said it's going to just update it by ID, you might need to add some kind of custom logic in there. And then you can do that by just manipulating the query builder. So for this, let's keep it simple. Let's just do a before write. So in here, we just need to return the values we want to write to the database. So let's bring in values, which is typed in here already. We can see the update task values come in. And the only thing we want to change, let's just pop into here. Let's add a, what should we do? Let's add a completed at field. So we had a timestamp in here for completed at. Let's let it be nullable because obviously it's not set to start with. Let's just pop back in here. Let's run Keel run again so that we are getting types generated as we change everything. So now we can come in here and we can see that completed at is the field it knows about now straight away. And let's make this to either, let's see if, so basically if someone's completed the task, if this update is completing a task, let's just set the time to now. So inputs.values dot completed. So if that's true, let's bring in, we've got context.now, which is really helpful for the execution time of that function. And then if in doubt, leave it undefined, that'll keep it null. So a simple hook that just means if someone's marking something as complete, let's just set that field as now. Save that. That's a really straightforward way to just hook into existing stuff and add logic. So that could be validation logic. That could be you want to call out to an external system and get some extra data before you write the record into the database, look up some external ID, etc. It's all just TypeScript. You can do anything you want. You can use npm packages. You can bring in external libraries. They're really fully fledged functions. So the other thing we can do on a lightweight way, which is great, is that's great for doing synchronous code. So something you need to do while that's being written. But let's say you want to do something that's related, a side effect action. So in here, let's say when someone signs up, we want to send a welcome email. So in this place, we can do on great. So syntax here is we're going to say on an event. So in this case, it's any create action. We want to trigger this function, send welcome email. Pop in there, do Keel generate again. Perfect. And now we've got a subscribers folder. So in here, we now have a subscribers file, send welcome email, that receives an event. And that event has the event name, when it happened, and the target, as well as the target's data. So this would be here, this is the account information. So this is really powerful. Let's just leave something here for now. So this allows us to very quickly just create asynchronous workloads. So when you deploy a Keel project, we will deploy an SQS queue. We'll handle the event queue setup, we'll handle the subscribers, and we'll wire all the things to make that just work. But that's all you need to think about there. So those are really straightforward ones. You can just easily either hook in or do something asynchronously. The other two ways you can write extra code, and you can basically extend everything, is just by writing a fully custom function. So in projects, so far we've got a way to just create a project. But in here, there's two other data types. There's read, there's read and there's write. So these are just basically kind of wrappers that allow you to do anything. You write a read function that can go, you can just write SQL in that, we give you some helpers, I'll show you in a second, or you can write, and that is a function that will write stuff to the database. So in this case, let's create generate project. And the same structure. This actually returns in this structure. So create project. You can also, what I'll show you here is, so far we've just used model fields as inputs, but you can also define your own custom ones. So in this case, we're just going to take an argument called name, and we're going to return something. So everything is typed. See? So let's just put in, let's create a new message called generate. Let's make this have success. So now we were saying we want to generate project custom function that takes those inputs and returns that response. So back in here, Keel generate. Now we've got a new generate project function, which we can see has the inputs as we described them, name, and then expects that response back, the generate project response back. So let me just pull in some pre-existing code so you don't watch me type a load of code out for a while. And let's bring in a few extra packages. So we have a permissions package in here, and we have a models package. There's a few more as well. There's a raw database package and a few others. Permissions allow you to build really complicated permissions by just giving you these helpers that you can allow or permission deny at any point in your logic of your code. Let's also install this OpenAPI thing, and then I'll talk you through what we're doing. So this generate project code is just a kind of a simple function that will take the name of your project and start to create your project, but also scaffold out use AI to just make some simple tasks. So a fun little demo. So if we talk through, firstly, we're checking if it's authenticated and we're allowing permissions. Then now we've got this, we can bring that in. Now we're creating a new client and we're using secrets. So with Keel, it has secret management built in. We can see that if we open the Keel config file, I've defined my secret and I've set it locally in the through the CLI. So now we can just pull that out. The nice thing about this is now definitely type safe. So you get type safety, you also get protection that if you try and run things without those secrets, it knows about that. We're doing a simple prompt that's just asking it to generate tasks with JSON. It's very not very thorough, so this is not a production script at all, but hopefully should do the trick. And then once we get the data back, we're logging it so we can see how this stuff interacts with tracing. And then we are going through and we're going to find the account that's linked to that identity. What does that field actually called? I spelled identity wrong somewhere, perfect. And then we've got a project, so we're going to create the project using that name. So you can see we're just using the models API here to very easily get a nice ORM to be able to write data in. And then for every task back from the response, we're going to add a task. So really easy ways to safely interact with the database. This is all fully type safe and updates as you go. So if I was to change any of my data structures in the Keel schema, press save. As long as Keel run is running, all these types are going to update as we go. And then it's going to return some information. So let's give it a go. Famous. It's always let's see what happens. So we're running Keel run. So we've restarted, so we get a fresh session with new traces. Let's go to our tools. Let's go to generate project. So let's say bacon cake. Let's let that run, and it worked. Fantastic. So let's go have a look let's list projects. Bake a cake has some tasks. Let's list those tasks. And there we go. We've got gather ingredients all the way to serve and enjoy. So let's have a look in monitoring and see how see what happened. So we've got loads of stuff happened in here. We can see the generate project function ran. We can expand this. We can see our console log. So all your console logs are captured and brought into the right piece here. And then for every transaction, you can see what's happening. All these things run in a transaction. So if any of these failed, we would just roll it back. And you can see all the database activity happening, and then finally returning the data. So loads of great visibility there. And then the final way to write your own custom code is through cron jobs. So you can define jobs in the schema. So let's do a send weekly summary. So let's say every Friday we want to send a weekly summary to all our users that tells them what tasks they've completed and what they've yet to complete. So jobs, there's two versions of jobs at Keel. There's scheduled jobs, which are really just cron jobs. So you can add in a schedule here, or you can add in a permission rule, and then they become kind of manually triggered jobs. So you can write scripts that are just triggered manually, and they're all handled from the console. You can define field inputs as well, so you have inputs into those jobs, and you can really easily build scripts that again are operationalized and the whole team can access. So let's just, for this one, let's keep schedule. Let's just do it every Friday. So every Friday at 5 PM, let's switch back here, same deal. Now we've got jobs, and now we've got a script. So here you can write scripts, and then that will handle the deploying of the cron jobs. And then again, you can see from the trace, you'll be able to see in the console all those executions, the traces of those executions, and then be able to, if they're manual, be able to run them manually. So that's a really brief overview of most of the kind of core functionality of Keel that allows you to really quickly build a backend that's scalable, and then also means that the whole team can engage with your project. So now this has all been local. So let's try and push this to the internet. Let's deploy it. So let's start by just let's commit this. And then, so the way you deploy code, because everything's based around this Keel schema, which is the text file, that everything's very version controlled. The whole process is version controlled. So how this has all been running locally just from the CLI, but when to deploy on the platform, you just link your repo with Keel, and then from that, every time there's a push, Keel will handle that and deploy the code. So let's go back to the console and let's create a new project. And we've done that. So Keel demo. We do support monorepos, so you can set your Keel code next to your front end in the same repo, but we're not doing that for now. And we're off. Cool. So we create a new project linked to that repo. Let's have a look. So this is our build pipeline. So whenever you push a change into a repo that an environment is linked to, then we will go through this process of validating your schema, building all your functions, doing the CI pipeline, and then from that, deciding and managing all the infrastructure. So in this case, this is our first one. So we'll build the functions, and then we'll deploy all the infrastructure this project needs based on what was in that schema. So it's all kind of infrastructure as schema in that sense, because we've defined an event handler, we've defined cron jobs, we'll spin up that infrastructure to make that work. And all the infrastructure we deploy is fully serverless. And so for every environment, you get a serverless Postgres database, and then all your code is spun up as serverless functions. Great, and there we go, it's live. So if we pop back into overview, we can see that we have these APIs now live on the internet. And we'll be able to interact with them in the same way. One thing I'll just show before we go is this is straight away we've ended up with one staging environment. But a really powerful point of Keel is letting you create multiple environments. So here we've got one branch, the main branch. We've got a staging environment linked to the main branch that's set to auto deploy. So we saw that as soon as I pushed, it built it and it deployed it. But we could easily then make another production environment. In this case, we'll just call it production. Manual approval in main. And what that means is every time we see a code push to main, we will still build it and we'll check that it's deployable, and we'll build your functions and we'll see if anything could be deployed in there, but it will still, you need to go into the console and approve it. So what's great about this is it allows you, it's really flexible. You can create kind of you can create multiple staging, multiple production, as many as you want. We spin up a whole new set of infrastructure for every single one of these environments with a totally isolated Postgres database and your functions, so you can wreak havoc in one of those and there's no way it can affect the others. The other piece here is really interesting. You could create multiple branches, you could have a QA, a pre-prod environment, but you could also create single tenancy environments. So you can create production environments for each kind of large customer, and then centrally, every time you push code, it's being deployed, but you can control what deploys go out to which environment really easily, but knowing that all those internal tools will work, and you can have them, you can just switch here between production and staging, and you always have these tools and you can just point them at whichever. We haven't deployed anything in production yet. And here are the tools. So there we go. Now we've got a deployed backend on the internet, full internal tools, serverless infrastructure, all deployed in about half an hour with Keel. Check it out at keel.so, and if you've got any questions, we'd love to hear feedback, questions, pop over to our Discord. Thanks.